Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transformational Meaning, a part of the Shielding Your Wellbeing webinar. I'm Trevor Wolf with OJJDP Zentak, and I'm joined by my colleague, Eileen Lafergie. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items to go over. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on OJJDP's multimedia channel, as well as their YouTube page. Closed captioning is available in the multimedia panel of the WebEx application. For optimal audio, please consider using the Call Me At feature, which is located in your audio settings or under the mute and unmute button. If you experience any technical difficulties throughout today's event, please feel free to reach out to myself or again, my colleague Eileen Lafergie. We will also be having a Q&A session following today's presentation. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat and provide as much context as possible so we can address those when the time comes. A certificate of attendance will also be provided following today's presentation. And again, this webinar is being recorded and will be available within 10 days. So again, thank you for joining us for the Supporting Heroes in Mental Health Foundational Training, also known as SHIFT. This is Transformational Meaning, which is a part of the Innocent Justice Foundation's webinar series. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Michelle Sipple, Program Coordinator at the Innocent Justice Foundation. Michelle?
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. So as Trevor said, my name is Michelle Sipple, and I am the Program Coordinator for SHIFT here at the Innocent Justice Foundation. The Innocent Justice Foundation was founded in 2007, and we're funded by OJJDP. We're here to support ICAC task force teams and their affiliates in the hope that we can provide some tips for them to mitigate their stress. Throughout our relationship, we have understood the heavy burden that law enforcement officers have to face, and we want to provide them with a space where they can have some tools to mitigate that stress and normalize asking for help. Like Trevor said, today's webinar is part 5 of Shielding Your Wellbeing, and we'll be discussing transformational meaning. So with that being said, I'd love to turn this over to our amazing trainers, Jean and Eric. And I'm going to have Jean introduce herself first and then pass it on to Eric. Jean, go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate the introduction. I just want to let you know that I have been with the Innocent Justice Foundation for almost the very beginning of when we started doing training. And I value this organization so much because we really are making an effort to ensure that people have the tools they need when doing the kind of difficult work we do with exposure to other people's trauma on an ongoing basis. We know how to take care of ourselves, not let it cloud our judgment, and not let it create harm in our personal lives. And we have done several webinars about different things that you can do to support that well-being. And this is sort of the final webinar in this set of episodes. And just so you have a sense of how I'm related to this field, I worked for many years as a specialized trauma treatment therapist at a program called the Assault Survivors Assistance Program here in Colorado at Lutheran Medical Center, and have also coordinated Colorado's Sex Offender Management Board. I was the first identified full-time designated administrator of that program in Colorado. And I also was the executive director of the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault, around other things that I've done in the past. But I have strong connection to this field and currently do training, consulting, and expert testimony in the kinds of cases that you all find yourselves working on. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to train with Eric. And Eric, you're up for introducing yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Gina. I appreciate that. And I'm very happy to be here today. This is a passion of mine. A little bit about myself. I am a retired Phoenix police detective. I retired after 24 years of service in 2018. The last 15 years of my time were spent as an Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force investigator and computer forensic examiner. I kind of split my time between both. I retired in 2018 and then worked for a software company that based out of Sweden that developed software to help internet crimes investigators reduce their mental stress and trauma. And the way I found that software, or the way the Phoenix Police Department found that software, is we were at a conference looking for software to help us mitigate what was happening, because we had lost an investigator. He quit one day. He just left because there was nothing in place. Nobody talked about anything like this. So we needed to do something to mitigate this. So that was step number one. And then throughout my post-retirement career, I taught a lot around the world, and I started to realize this is really bothering a lot of people. This is affecting more people than just one person that I knew and I worked with. This is happening all over the place. So I'm now fortunate enough. I'm retired. I work part-time teaching with the Innocent Justice Foundation. They are gracious enough to have me as a trainer. I started as a police officer, retired as a detective. I'm not a credentialed person, but I have been in the trenches for many, many years, and I'm very aware of what this can do to you. So thank you again for having me, and I am super looking happy. I said that all wrong. I'm super happy and looking forward to teaching with you, Gene, today. Welcome. All right, so before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that this is now historically in law enforcement, talking about feelings when you get overwhelmed or you don't feel you're supported is something that we keep to ourselves. And that's not a good thing, because nothing ever changes if we never talk about it, or we don't have the ability or the space to talk about our feelings. So in this meeting, we're going to smash this stigma of we don't talk about feelings, because this is all about feelings. And if we can't look at how our feelings are changing and how our emotions are being affected, then there's really no way to move the ball forward and to help yourselves and help the people that you work with, quite honestly. So the whole point of this is there is no stigma. It is not courageous, in my personal opinion. It is not the courageous person that shoves this down and shoves this down. It's the courageous person that raises their hand and says, help, period.
I love that, Eric. I think that's a wonderful way to describe what people need to do when they're struggling with things. And I'm going to take a moment now and go over the agenda that we have today to cover what we're going to cover, and remind you that if you have questions that come up that we don't answer in the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll have time to answer at the end. So we're going to initially talk about how the experience of trauma, and that includes what we call vicarious exposure through addressing other people's trauma. Certainly children who are sexually exploited or abused are experiencing severe trauma, and how that disrupts our belief systems, our sort of core, almost unconscious belief systems. Like, one that many of us have is people are supposed to take care of kids, not harm them. And those things we literally build as an operating system in the world. And when trauma shows us that something very different than that is happening, it's very disruptive to our belief systems. We want to develop for you an overview of what transformational meaning is and its role in how it helps us recover from trauma and engage in post-traumatic growth, which is a powerful, positive experience. We will also discuss the components of what transformational meaning needs to develop in our experience of trauma and of the world. And we're going to explore how people might apply these components to their own personal experience to provide stronger support for the development of transformational meaning as a part of their addressing and dealing with trauma as they move through this work. And we have a wonderful quote here that talks about how trauma literally shatters your worldview and disrupts those sort of core beliefs. And post-traumatic growth doesn't ask us to, as Eric said, close down or push away the trauma. It really is the experience of trying to rebuild those beliefs with the idea that you recognize the bad things in the world happen. The horrible trauma that some people experience is real, and you feel the feelings about that without allowing it to change your worldview to the point where you believe everything is terrible. You need to hold that sort of optimism and hopefulness about things can be better in some way. When I work with kids who have been through horrible traumas, one of the things we talk about when we're talking about this is, yeah, you're going to be different in some ways because of this, but you're going to be sadder maybe, and you're also going to be wiser and able to take better care of yourself in the future. So we incorporate strength in spite of the trauma and the pain that we know people will feel as a part of this. And feeling it is important. It's also important to be able to do something outside of that. And as a way of looking at this, we're going to look at how trauma impacts us, and then how post-traumatic growth impacts us. We may develop or recognize personal strengths we had that we haven't had in the past. We may recognize new possibilities in our lives because we see the world differently. We often are much better at relating to other people, stronger, more empathetic, more able to support others. We often appreciate the good things in our lives differently as a result of this. And I think I see Eric shaking his head. It's such a powerful part of that post-traumatic growth. And then we recognize that many people have spiritual change. They feel more connected to whatever it is that feeds their spiritual life, whether that is a faith-based practice or a meditative practice, or just the recognition of the good in the world and honoring that. It really can be powerful for us.
So what do we mean when we say transformational meeting? It's basically, this is like the definition, if you will. It's the changes that we're going to incorporate in our worldview and our core beliefs, anything that's been disrupted by trauma or vicarious trauma, that incorporate the trauma and change how we view and interact with the world in positive ways. That the key there is incorporating the trauma, is getting to the point where you can think about the event, but it doesn't cause you some type of emotional overload at that point where you so it's taking this mess and turning it into something beautiful. It's taking the manure of the situation you're in and using that to grow a beautiful rose, if you will. It's not so we're going to wallow in the filth. We're going to use this to make ourselves be that beautiful flower. Just because we are swimming in those waters does not mean we have to feel that way and think that way. And a lot of people have done things, not just in law enforcement, other things, to turn something into a positive message. For example, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That was born out of the death of children who were killed by drunk drivers. So did the mothers wallow and wallow and wallow and never become wise? No, they did something about it, and they changed the world in a positive place. People in law enforcement, if you work in crimes against children, think about how you could, in the public, help kids be better. I mean, you're doing everything you can to help the children that are being victimized, but there's a whole world of them out there as well that could really use support, like Big Brother, being a coach, something like that. It's taking this negative worldview that you have based on the work that you do and turning it into something positive, turning it into growth instead of something that's going to stunt your growth.
Wonderful way to describe that.
Thank you.
So development of transformational meaning requires some sort of baseline experiences. It's not going to occur likely after some kind of minor distress, but it's going to be something more major, like the kinds of cases you all work on, or if you're working with youth in other circumstances where there's harm. So it's going to be something that causes serious distress because in reality, minor distressors don't change the way we view the world and typically don't upset our belief systems in the same way. As Eric has said so beautifully, it requires your time and attention. It means you need to feel, deal with, talk with others about, and integrate that negative experience as real and part of your world. That helps us address that trauma and any symptoms we might have. And if you have questions about what trauma symptoms look like, we have a number of other webinars that are available on the OJJDP website and also on the Innocent Justice Foundation website that talk about how trauma impacts us specifically. And we have to address the negative emotions that arise out of that exposure. It requires the support of other people. You cannot do this alone. Isolation is not the way to transform trauma into something powerful. You need to have support. It's not like you need to tell everyone in the world, but you need to have connection with others to be able to process this. And the positive outcome is it can change your life in really powerful ways. People become stronger, more resilient than people who've never experienced trauma, which we didn't used to understand, but we have very, very clear, strong research that tells us that now. And we need to recognize all the ways that trauma has harmed us. And that includes the physical trauma responses, things that might happen during specific cases or specific kinds of exposure. People talk about having changes in their sleeping patterns. They talk about having changes in the way they feel physically, sometimes exhaustion, those sorts of things. And we do have a slide for this that I think Michelle is going to get us soon. We also talk about those survival-based reactions. When we are experiencing serious trauma, if you are responding to a home where kids are being abused on a search warrant, or where there is traumatic material on a search warrant, when you're dealing with child victim survivors or family members of those survivors, we often have those fight, flight, or freeze survival-based reactions that literally we operate differently during that time than we do in our normal functioning. It's much more automatic. We don't have a lot of choice about it, and it can feel overwhelming. And these things can impact our own behavior and our interactions with others. Often, people who love us see those changes before we see them. So if one thing you can take away is if someone you care about says, I think your work's getting to you, or you're acting different than you used to act, rather than telling them, oh, I have such a hard job, you just don't understand. See if you can kind of be quiet and say, what are you seeing that's different? And listen to what they have to say. And it changes our thinking about the world. One of the most common things we see in law enforcement and in people who work with victim survivors a lot is that they start seeing danger for kids everywhere. And they think everybody might be harming children. We become more cynical in the world, and we stop believing in the good sometimes. Those are things we don't want to let keep a hold of us. Those are things we want to address, which is why we deal with those feelings when they come up. And Eric, I think, is going to give you some excellent examples of how you can cope with the trauma initially.
Yeah. So basically, that's what the shift training does. This is foundational training. It's designed to help you, number one, understand what's happening, and then number two, deal with it. So we teach some coping skills that help address the trauma and overactive stress responses. Because if you think about it, everybody, all the people that you know that don't do the job that you do, that just do a regular job, say they deliver the mail, they have stresses. They have all kinds of overwhelming stress just with life. Life is a stressful thing. But you add on top of that, now you have all that as well, but then you add on top of that the the stress of these images popping up in your mind, or a video playing in your head, or you feeling strong emotions because you just happen to be at a location where something had happened previously. Things that are happening to you, we want to show you how you can address these things. But first and foremost, you have to understand it's happening and realize it's happening. You can't ignore it. Ignoring it doesn't help anything. I mean, ignoring things, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're pushing it down again is what you're doing, and you're waiting for it to rear its ugly head, and it will. So we have to watch for things like dissociation when we're just pretending it's not happening. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for your support system. And kind of getting back to the last slide where, Jean was talking about having somebody, that you can talk with about it. You all have relationships or had relationship with somebody who was in a bad relationship with somebody else, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see that the person that they were with were treating them horribly because they were so close to it. So it's so important to let your friends have a voice in how you are, because they can sometimes see things you cannot see. And if you can't see them, you can't address them.
That's so important, Eric. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. So basically, once we can address it and once we can figure out this is happening to us, we can do things, and that can help us tone down our reactivity, because overreacting is a very common sign of you're way overstressed, you're getting to burnout when everything sets you off. And when you're constantly reactive in this world, you are letting your emotions drive your actions. And it should be the opposite way around. Your actions should drive your emotions. Your thoughts should drive your emotions, not the other way around. And if you can reduce your reactivity and be more of a conscious of and be aware of what's happening, things can change. Your sleep will get better. Everything gets more normalized, and you'll have use of your social support. It gets reestablished. You make friends, or you reestablish friendships. And I have gone through all of this. I have lost the friends, reestablished friendships, and just having the general functioning, just working, is great. But I'll tell you something, it's not something that, I mean, the concept is easy, right? The concept is easy. Take control of your thoughts and emotions. But man, in practice, that's a whole nother ballgame. It is it's a long road, but it starts with introspection, and it starts with loving yourself enough to say, I am worth this. Because change isn't easy. Change is very difficult.
I think when you're
sorry,
talking,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. When you're talking about this, Eric, I think about a young prosecutor I worked with who was working on a child death case and had to do basically memorizing a videotape of this because she had to prosecute the case. She had to know everything in it. And she called me one day when I was acting as a therapist and said, I go home at night and kiss my kids and I don't feel anything. I'm so shut down trying to protect myself from this awful stuff I have to deal with. I'm feeling shut down from my own children, and I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. And she came into therapy at that point. Not everybody needs therapy. Sometimes it's not that severe. Sometimes you can talk to a friend, but she sat with those feelings so that she didn't carry them around with her when she was interacting with her kids. But it took her recognizing how she'd been harmed, what had changed about how she was interacting in her own world, to be able to step out of that and reestablish those strong, supportive connections with her own children.
Absolutely. That's of paramount importance. And then kind of the last point on this is your change. Things are going to change in your worldview and your opinion when you are addressing some deep rooted emotions in you. That's gonna have some effect. So just keep that in mind. Change is not easy. Everybody, how many times have you heard this? That's how we've always done it. I can't stand that term, but that's just kind of people wanting to be comfortable with not changing. And if you don't change, if you don't tell yourself, I'm important enough, I'm worth it, and I'm willing to change, then you suffer and everybody else along with you suffers, the people you care about the most. Because, like she said about the children, don't your kids, doesn't your spouse, your parents, don't they want you to be happy? Don't they want you to be happy? You want to be happy, right? So everybody wins. But again, we certainly recognize change is not easy. It's very, very difficult, especially when you are a type A personality in this field.
That's so true. I remember at one point in my life, one of the ways I would act when I was over traumatized is I would start working longer and longer and longer hours and not pay attention to my personal life. And luckily, I had built strong relationships in my life enough so that a group of people in my women's group said, "We're worried about you. You're working too much again. This is not a good thing." Several of the trainers in the shift program said to me, "You're usually really good at taking care of yourself. What's going on?" And my husband said, "You don't have to work like this all the time." And it took all three of them before I was really fully willing to listen. But it was like, okay, these people all care about me and value me. I need to pay attention because I'm not. The way I'm behaving, I'm not valuing. Working 14 hours a day is not a reasonable way to interact in the world. And it was really helpful to me once I acknowledged that what they were telling me was accurate. And when you're in the process of developing transformational meaning, the first thing is to notice those changes. And some of the thinking changes I noticed in that process was, I have to do this. I have to do this because otherwise people are going to get hurt. And a kind of a grandiose thought, which is, I'm the only one who knows how to do this well enough. That's not true. There are thousands of people across this country working on protecting kids from this kind of harm. And when you notice that you feel like you're the only one, that can be really important. Um, and and then realizing that those thoughts made me not asking my colleagues for help enough, not making sure that I referred things out rather than trying to take care of everything myself, and recognizing that every time I did that, I was overworking more, being less available to my husband and my friends and my stepkids and my family, and then saying, I don't want to stay stuck here. I want to do this differently. I had to feel the feelings about feeling at some points guilty about doing that, feeling shame because I didn't honor my other colleagues enough and that they were every bit as capable as me. And then also sadness because of some of the time I'd lost with people I loved. But once I did that, I could start that struggle with incorporating, how do I incorporate changes in the way I see the world in a way that's going to be positive for me? And the way that you do this, which is really important to understand, is called cognitive processing. How are we using our brains to process this material? And the first part of that is it has to be voluntary and intentional. So for instance, I was working with a colleague last week who said that early in his career, he saw an image that just overwhelmed him dramatically because it reminded him of his son, who was very young at the time. And he said he just shut down the computer and left and didn't say anything to anyone, didn't talk to anyone at all. What he has realized since is that if he had said to himself, I'm being really troubled by this image, I need to take a moment, take a break, do some breathing, drop my reactivity, and then tell a colleague what I'm reacting to. He said, I wouldn't have had to leave work. I would have been able to stay. But because I did this sort of unconscious running away from it, the same thing about leaving the image acted very differently in his life. So when you can recognize it and know what you're asking for, you can seek support more quickly, and you don't do as much harm to your ability to work. What he recognized was that the thought that people could do this to kids when he loved his own children too much was what overwhelmed him. And so he needed to think about knowing that some people really do this, and that his work was helping protect those kids who had that done to them, that his work was important in that process. He talked about it. He talked about how he thought differently about his work then and valued his work more rather than feeling like it was awful. He talked about being able to talk about it with some trusted colleagues. And he talked about for himself, he was able to pray about it. The thing is, we need to process this information in words because trauma activates a different part of our brain, our midbrain, that creates a whole lot of stress chemicals in our system and creates involuntary responses. When we are thinking about it and talking about it or praying about it or writing about it, that's another thing you can do. You're using this part of your brain, the part of your brain that normally processes your experience. And so it's healthier for you. And that's why it's healthier. It also profoundly involves the struggle to recognize the reality of the trauma and come to terms with it. Realizing that people do harm children in these ways is a really hard struggle. And a lot of people just get rageful initially when they realize that, really angry, but the anger spills over because they're not doing it consciously about how do I use this anger to do my job better, to make sure that we're protecting as many kids as we can. So we need to really struggle with it to create a new worldview that says, I'm going to do a great job at my work and I'm going to take care of myself so that I take care of my own children and value their experience in life as much as I value the experience of the kids that I'm working with on the job. And that's a struggle over time. It really requires that you change how you think and how you behave. And Eric, I know you have some really wonderful ways to get to this, some of the things you can ask yourself when you're trying to struggle with this transformation.
Well, the biggest thing is to recognize that you are a human being. You're not Superman, Superwoman. This isn't, it does affect you. And getting back to the story Gene told about that colleague, I had that same thing happen to me. It was just a regular Tuesday and I'm going through images and a collage popped up and it looked exactly like my daughter at the time. She was 7 and she was performing oral sex on a adult male. And I took my headphones off, ran outside, called my wife, and she thought I had gotten in a car accident. I was beside myself. What just happened? And she said, calm down, calm down. Okay. She calmed me down. But what I did in that moment was I told somebody. I went to my spouse at that moment. And of course, when I came back in, people asked, what happened? Why did you go running out of the room? So it's important, first of all, that if something like that happens, you have to recognize it. That is so important. Recognize that this is happening and it's making me feel this particular way. So what I would do, I would continuously tell people it's not bothering me. I would tell myself more than anything, it's not bothering me. It's not bothering me. But you have to come to terms with this fact. Your perspective on the world is skewed based on your profession. Mine certainly is. After 15 years of 40 to 60 to 80 hours a week dealing with child exploitation, horrible people doing things to innocent people day in and day out, of course your worldview is going to get skewed. Of course it is. But it's so important to try to focus on the fact that it is a big, beautiful world out there. It is amazing. And we just happen to have this tiny little slice into this, the most horrible thing human beings can do to other human beings, in my opinion. And that's what you deal with all day. So it's so important to just back up, broaden your worldview, talk to people who hang out with people that aren't in this world, aren't in this horror all the time, and see that it is different. And then you can see the possibilities. That's what positivity brings, is possibilities. That's it. Negativity, when you get negative and the boss isn't doing this and the job stinks and this and that, you spread that around. And then before you know it, everyone is feeling and thinking the same way you are. The opposite works too. Being positive as you can be. And I know it's not easy. I know what you do. I've seen it. I have things in my head, of course. But you deal with it, recognize it, you come to grips with it. That's the hardest part. It is affecting me. I am fallible. I am fallible. That is so hard to come to terms with. But you are. And not only that, there is a whole generation of people behind you that are so eager, just the way you were when you first started this job. So when it comes time, it's time to pass on your knowledge to the next generation and leave healthy before the job destroys you.
That's really important. And I just want to acknowledge for the trainees, I think we skipped over several slides. There must be some technical difficulties right now. I know, Eric, you're going to talk about transformational meaning, and
Yeah. So
the-
basically, I'm sorry. No, basically, on this slide, we're just talking about being able to ask yourself questions instead of just stop telling yourself everything. Stop telling yourself this and telling yourself that. Be open to yourself and ask yourself questions. Why is this bothering me? Well, in our line of work, obviously it's bothering you because this is something that does not compute with a normal human brain. It just doesn't compute. Where do you put this? Where do you put what you are experiencing or you are witnessing? Where do you put that where it's not going to hurt? There's really no place. And so that's the first thing you got to realize. This is bothering me. It truly is. And, you know, how is this changing how I believe like I normally believe? So for me, I was a joyful young man. When I was first law enforcement, I was happy-go-lucky. It was great. But I let the job change my values. I became judgmental. I became callous. Things like that were happening to me, just the job. And then going into child crimes on top of it, boy, did that change everything. I lost God completely doing the job. I was, raised up religiously, not terribly so, but I went to church on Sundays and things like that. And I lost all of that. So that was something that really was hard to struggle with. And man, my behavior, wow. When you look back, I had an incident that happened to me. I'll just share it with you real quick. When I was an investigator, after about 3 years or so, I had a bald spot develop on my underneath my chin, about the size of a golf ball. And I went to the doctor and I said, what's happening here? And he said, well, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a detective. What kind of work do you do? Child crimes. And it was basically him like saying, well, duh, that's caused by stress. It's called alopecia. And that is a physical stress response to what you are going through. So you clearly have some stress issues. And it wasn't until that happened to me until I that's when I really started to look at myself and say, wait a second. And I saw that my marriage was going in the toilet. I was fighting with the kids all the time. My drinking was up. I was isolating myself. I stopped doing the hobbies. So all these things changed. And the way I acted around people that I loved and cared about changed. I was callous and cynical and sarcastic and cutting and mean. I was just mean. And I didn't recognize any of that stuff. It took an incident for me to slap me in the face and say, hey, this is what's going on. And then you ask yourself these thoughts you're thinking, are they helpful in what is in this change? Because once I realized I was doing all these things and I was becoming this person I wasn't becoming, that's when I had to start to unravel who I was. That's the hard part. That's the hard part, right, Gene? Because now you're instead of judging everybody else outwardly, because you get so good at that now you have to turn it in on yourself, and it's not the same.
And what's real is if you can do that with some degree of compassion. Think about how your best friend would address your sarcasticness, or they wouldn't just say you're a horrible person and be sarcastic at you. They would say, what's going on? What's making you feel this way? Is there something different you can think about this? Is there a different way to look at it?
Yep.
Um, think about how you would respond to a good friend and give yourself at least that grace.
Absolutely.
With
And then this as well, too,
questions
Jean,
like these.
and this as well, like you
Mhm.
wouldn't let any of your friends talk to you the way you talk to yourself inside your head. They wouldn't be your friend anymore if you let them talk to you like that. Right. So again, that kind of gets to this next slide. Is there a different way to think about this? It's so important. The people that you love, the people that care about you, you believe they want you to be happy. If you asked any of them, whether they're here, whether they've passed on, whatever, do they want you to be happy? Of course they do. So you have to want yourself to be happy as well. And that takes changing the way you look at things. And again, there's that change word that is so difficult. And you ask yourself questions like, what would I change if I could change? Well, you can start with how I react to everything and how I am out in the world, how I am around the people that I love and care about, because I want them to be happy, right? And then are these changes that you're doing, are they consistent? Could I feel proud? Yes. This is transforming. This is where I am and this is where I want to go. Is it worth it? Yes, it has to be worth it. You have to be worth it. And then you have to be able to walk down that path. And it's not going to be easy. But I will tell you right now, I am so proud of the fact that I have been able to process a lot of the trauma that I incurred. And I can look at the world in an optimistic, positive way, which people that know me can't even believe it because, law enforcement took that from me. But transformational meaning is what this is all about. I have gone through this. I'm not 100% on the other side, but I'll tell you what, the view is great from up here. It's just a difficult climb, but you're worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it often is other people around you who can help with that. One of the things that my husband used to do for myself and many of my friends, because of course, for a while, I eliminated people who weren't doing the same kind of work I was doing from my life, because I only wanted to be around other people that were in the trenches like me. And he started saying, I'm going to tell you all, if we had a dinner party or we went to someone's house, I'm going to tell you all when I, as a real person, have had enough of this talk about your work, and we're going to talk about something different. And people started laughing about that initially, but then they said, this is really helpful because we would probably talk about work 24/7 if he didn't say something like that. So think about, how can your colleagues or your supervisor help you? If your supervisor's saying, I don't want you staying here 12 hours a day, you need to take some time. Don't say, you don't understand how many cases I have. They do. They have to give them to you. If you have a colleague who says, let's go do something for lunch, think about the possibility of saying yes instead of sitting at your desk and not eating lunch that day. Um, do you have options in your world, whether it's a spouse or a partner or a really close friend? Is there a peer support program at your law enforcement agency or at your agency? Are there people who can help? If what you realize is getting impacted are your spiritual beliefs, do you have a chaplain in your agency? Do you have a priest or an imam or a rabbi or a minister or even other people that you practice some sort of spiritual work with that you could go to and say, I would like to change my practice so I'm addressing this better? And then many of us have access to EAPs. As I said, this doesn't always require going to therapy, but if therapy would help, it can be really powerful in helping you get to where you can process the difficult emotions if you feel stuck around that, or if there are some symptoms that you can't clear on your own. Um, a good group of people to ask about who to go to as a therapist if you don't have an EAP is your victim support people, because they refer traumatized people to therapy all the time. They know who's good and who's not, and who understands trauma and who doesn't. So think about those sorts of things. And then think about and talk about what's troubling you. A lot of times what we do when things are troubling us is we start just talking about the difficult material, what you saw, or what the horrible image was, or what the horrible thing that happened to this kid was. The reality is that's already in your head. You already saw that. It's stuck. That's partly why you're having symptoms. So if you can think about, this is how it impacted me, this is what I feel when I think about it, you're more likely to process it and move to transforming that trauma rather than just repeating it. We've probably all had the experience of somebody walking into our office or sitting next to us and just telling us about the most horrible experience in the world that they had on one of their cases. And sometimes it sort of feels like somebody assaulted you almost. And part of the reason for that is when we can work on something, it's protective because we're using this part of our brain. When people just dump stuff on us that we can't do anything about because we're not working on it, that's more likely to traumatize us. So it's really important when you want to transform trauma, how did it impact me? What emotions am I feeling? How did it change my thoughts? How did it change my behavior? As Eric said so clearly, that's what we need to be looking at when we want to transform things, not just the content of the difficult material. That will keep intruding on us until we get it integrated. That will be the thing that keeps bothering us.
Absolutely. And then if you're not having these conversations to address something specific, like Jean said, images or videos or stuff like that, then if you really think about it, you're just spreading negativity. This job sucks. I looked at more of this crap and the boss doesn't know what I'm doing. And there's the caseload is this. Everybody knows all of that. Everybody knows the images are horrible. Everybody knows that bosses sometimes aren't supportive, which is terrible that that happens in this world, but sometimes it's the case. Hopefully you're not in that situation. But like she said, you have to address, listen, these images make me feel this way. The boss not having my back makes me feel a certain way. And the other important part of this piece is if you're the person that someone else wants to disclose to, it takes two people to have this disclosure at least. You have to be able to hold space non-judgmentally for whatever it is they're feeling. They don't want you to fix the things for them. They just want you to help, if that makes sense. They don't want you to analyze and psychoanalyze them. They just want somebody to listen and help. But things you can talk about with a trusted colleague or a person, again, this requires that that person can hold space for you and you can hold space for them. Is, this caused me to feel like this, man. I lost God. I lost God. And maybe you can talk to that about the person and maybe they have a completely different perspective. But what's interesting is when you work on this and you find somebody or several people that you can discuss this with, you can see how things change you. And when you can start to harness a little bit of the positivity, it can just snowball because you can develop all kinds of strengths that you didn't even know you had, or you had and then you lost them. And I love this. It says wisdom developed. There's a very, very famous person that says, when you're traumatized, you have a choice. You can stay wounded or you can become wise. You can use that wound to teach yourself wisdom. And then once you teach yourself wisdom, then the people that are around you will feel that positivity and feel that love. And it's surreal to me how being positive just completely changes my life experience. But having that ability to hold space and ask a question, Change your question from how are you doing? How are you feeling? Just a simple word like that changes an interaction. And it actually tells somebody, because someone might want to get something off their chest and they might not think they have anybody to disclose to. And if you say something, you approach with positivity, openness, and you say, how are you feeling? Then they're going to be able to disclose. Wouldn't you want to have someone there to disclose for you? So give that back.
Really powerful, really important. I think about one time, because I had talked with colleagues before, I responded extensively to the Columbine High School shootings. And I was also asked after the investigation was mostly concluded to debrief the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the 28 people that did the investigation in the school, worked with all the families, all of that. And I had responded every day for 60 days after the shooting to our crisis counseling centers. I had literally talked to everyone who had witnessed a death, been shot at, or family members who lost anybody. And when I went to do this debriefing, and I didn't recognize it at the time, we spent about 4.5 hours. I took a trusted law enforcement colleague, because whenever I work with law enforcement, I work with a law enforcement colleague. And literally, I didn't hear anything new. I had already talked to people who told me everything about what happened during those things that they investigated. So I thought, I don't need to even think about this much. I know all this stuff. And as we're walking away, they were very grateful. And to this day, people will run up and hug me and say, and thank me for that. But as we're walking away, I start feeling like I really screwed that up. I didn't do a good job with this. We didn't take good care of those people. And my colleague, who knew that I typically handle things differently, literally stepped in front of me in the parking lot and said, "What's the matter with you? You don't act like this." And I burst into tears. And he was like, "We're going to sit on the curb and talk about this until you figure out what's wrong." And literally, what the belief that had been disrupted for me was, I'd been to a lot of crime scenes in my life. I had responded to a lot of horrible things, but I always often knew more than other therapists, knew more than the victim advocates, knew more than the child protection workers. But I never had been in a circumstance where I knew more about what happened than a whole room full of law enforcement officers. And I had in my head that it wasn't dangerous doing all this hard work because the cops held the hardest beliefs. And what I realized was two things. I had been putting that on them, even though that wasn't always the case. We all hold different beliefs depending on our experience at any given time. And I was discounting the harm they were experiencing as a result. And I became much more supportive of law enforcement people I worked with during the moment, not when I went and did a formal debriefing, not when I was doing something that was a part of my role as a therapist, but as a person. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't broken down and I hadn't had a colleague that was willing to say, "What's going on? You are behaving in a way that's not right for you." So we can really help one another out when those things happen.
Absolutely. Be the help that somebody needs.
Mhm. And then also, when you are thinking about how you identify what's changed, is there some change in how you're relating with other people? Are you becoming more critical or judgmental? Are you withdrawing? Are you becoming more isolated and just not talking to people or not engaging with them? And are you beginning to see, as you talk about how you feel, that you get more appreciation or gratitude for others, like I did for the law enforcement people that were working on these difficult cases with me? Recognizing how much of this they held really made me a better colleague in the moment for them. And the other thing I did was focus on the fact I didn't have to be the strong one, even if I knew a lot, even if I was exposed to a lot, even if I was a lead on something. I could always ask for support from other people because we're stronger together, not individually. And that was a really important lesson for me. And it impacted my not overworking so much. It impacted my asking for help. It impacted me in a number of ways that made me a stronger and more effective therapist. And it supported my spiritual beliefs, which were so important about trying to address the harm in the world and support the good in the world. And I started supporting the good for myself and for the people I was working with regularly more often. So all of those things shifted for me out of being able to recognize that I was putting something on other people that wasn't theirs.
I'd like to touch really quickly, and thank you for that. That's very insightful. I'd like to touch on the gratitude thing. Interestingly enough, I interviewed two people this morning for my podcast, and both of them, one of them runs a nonprofit foundation to help law enforcement officers locate missing children. And the other one runs a software company that helps investigators find people that are exploiting children. And both of them told me this morning that their lives changed based on a thank you that they received from a law enforcement officer. Just a thank you for assisting in the identification of a victim changed the path of this man's life. The other person, same thing. A thank you changed everything. So gratitude in law enforcement is something we are not very familiar with. We are not good at expressing it. We're not good at sharing it with people. But it is so very important to feel that you're appreciated and to also show that appreciation. Again, be the appreciation that you want, because it feels great. It feels great to receive a thank you, but it really feels great to give a heartfelt thank you too. It really does.
And we can do them so easily. If somebody does a great job, we can send a text or an email. We can send a text or an email to their boss.
And you might change their life. You might, and
Yes.
those people's lives that were changed, they have changed countless lives because of gratitude. That's all it took.
One of the things I've realized over the course of my work in terms of gratitude is people will often say, how do you do this kind of work? It's awful what you do, that you deal with the hardest things in the world. And I'm really able to say that I have gratitude for my clients and for survivors with whom I work, because I recognize that I also get to see the most amazing, strong, resilient people come out of the horrible things that have happened to them. And what a gift that is in the world. So it's really interesting how gratitude just becomes a part of your life when you are open to knowing what you feel and open to recognizing, yeah, this is hard work, but look at what wonderful things I get to see as a result.
And
It's very powerful.
yes, absolutely. But also, another key to this that you have to understand is you have to be able to accept somebody else's gratitude as well. We are so good at deflecting. No, it was this, it was that. If you're one of those people, I've been one of those people my entire life. Someone tried to hit me up with a compliment. I wrote a joke about it. You want to mess up a cop? Give him a heartfelt compliment, because we don't know where to put it. You have to be able to, and that gets back to loving yourself, thinking you deserve it. So accept that gratitude. And when you can accept it, it makes it a lot easier to give it back out.
It absolutely does. And so there are benefits of engaging in this, dealing with the hard stuff, recognizing how it's impacted you, owning the negative changes, and allowing yourself to do it differently. You will end up with less depression in a lot of the fields: psychotherapy, law enforcement, child protection, people who work with this really difficult traumatic material. Depression and trauma symptoms are really high across the board for people. That those symptoms and depression reduce when you actually do this. You also get improved physical health because every time you're acting out of trauma, you're dumping negative stress chemicals into your body. And some of them get stuck, cortisol particularly, and can impact our health long term. I mean, literally, people who don't address trauma die on average 10 years earlier than people who do. So think about the improvements in your health. Eric talked about you sleep better sometimes. You find yourself eating healthier. You do and not craving the fat and sugar that we crave when we have lots of stress chemicals in our bodies. And you're less isolated. You have, when you share and talk with people or let someone support you, you don't feel isolated. You don't feel alone. It's automatic. And that improves your relationships with the other people in your life,
People want to be around
with
you
your
again.
family members.
If they want to be around you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really
yeah,
powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I would say, just to kind of tack onto that, absolutely. And it's not pseudoscience anymore that being positive and thinking in a positive way and keeping a positive mindset actually improves your health physically. And I'm 100%, I'm 100% success story when it comes to that, because I was an emotional eater. And once I was able to address and get and work on things to get past what the emotions caused me, my eating went down, my health improved, my weight went down, and I went to the doctor and my blood pressure was lower than I could ever imagine. And I didn't really change anything. My daily routine didn't change. My physical activity didn't change. It was just being positive. Because if you believe that being angry and stressed can affect your physical health, which I don't think anybody would argue that, then you also have to agree that the positive side can also affect your health as well. It can improve it, 100% improve it.
Absolutely. And one of the things, this idea that we increase hope for the future, that we become more optimistic in some sort of profound ways because we can see possibilities, comes from the fact that we had something bad happen to us or someone else and it impacted us. And we decided to respond to it differently, intentionally, to do something different. So it gives us a sense of agency and more capacity to decide to respond to things rather than feel like our feelings are just falling out of the sky on our head. We understand that the way we believe and the way we behave, the way we act, can give us greater power to respond to what happens to us in the world, and therefore greater ability to take care of ourselves, to take care of others, and to engage in positive experiences in our lives.
And be conscious of our reactions. That's the thing, is that you have to be able to, once you get in a positive mindset, you can be more conscious about how you are acting and being around other people. I used this in the grocery store the other day. I got behind a gentleman that was taking forever and he was having an issue with the clerk. And normally I'd get upset and all this other stuff. I felt it coming. I felt I got in the wrong line, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped myself and I said, let's make this a positive interaction. And I turned it completely around, ended up having a wonderful conversation with that man. And that was a conscious decision of mine. I didn't just react to the negativity. It wasn't reactive. And this just gives you it just gives you power that you didn't even realize you had. The power of positivity is as strong, if not stronger, than the power of negativity. You just have to harness it.
Absolutely. And the other thing is there's a greater likelihood of post-traumatic growth. I mean, one of the things I know that I've been able to do, I've been in this field for over 40 years. I've done different jobs in it, but I've been exposed to this material for over 40 years, and I still love my work. But because I have taken the time to make sure that I understand how it's impacting me, and I've surrounded myself with people that will remind me if I forget, and I address it when it comes up, so it doesn't drain me, it feeds my spirit. I literally feel happy and engaged and thrilled to be able to do this work every day, which is an amazing gift. And so that's another benefit of dealing with the hard stuff. It gives you more access to the good stuff. This is an Irish poet that I love, David White. And it really talks about, we avoid thinking about how hard things have been for us, or how much we've been harmed by some of the work we've done, because we don't, as Eric said, love ourselves or feel like we're worth it in some way. We feel like we have to shut it down. But the reality is, when you recognize those black sticks when the fire has gone out, you can see that someone has written something new in the ashes of your life and build something powerful and healthy and alive out of those ashes. And we've all worked with survivors, trauma survivors who've done that. Think about the people that you have the most respect for, whether that's a child victim who ended up, recovering in spite of not having good support, whether that's a trafficking survivor, whether that's any of those people. Sometimes people really come out the other side stronger and better and more resilient, and allow yourself to have that experience as well.
Absolutely. And it is, well, first off, I want to say, don't ever forget what amazing work you are doing. You are changing the world. You are changing the lives of people that otherwise their lives would be horrifying and terrible. And you are interceding in that, whether it's putting a pedophile in jail or it's rescuing a live victim. You are making changes to the world in a positive way. And realize that you are a hero. Everybody that is not in law enforcement that finds out what you do for a living, do they tell you, do they crap on you because this and that? No, they tell you that's amazing work you're doing, because it is. It really is. You have to understand you're doing incredible things that will echo throughout all of time. And when you can realize how important and how powerful you are, and that you're truly a hero, it can help you feel that I am worth it. I am worth it. And then you can transform.
And that's true regardless of what side of the field you're in. If you're in mental health, if you're in child protection, if you're in victim services, if you're in law enforcement, if you're in prosecution, you work in youth programs, all of these kinds of work really are doing what Eric said. You're changing the world for other people, sometimes one at a time, sometimes many at a time. And it's powerful, positive, life-affirming work, and you are offering that to others, and recognizing for yourself is incredibly important,
Yes, please
because it
offer to
allows you
yourself.
to,
Please
yeah,
offer that to yourself. The help and the love that you give to the world, give it to yourself. Please. You're worth it. You
absolutely.
really are.
And with that, I'm going to do a review of the things that we covered today, and then we have time for questions from any of you who have questions for us. We have talked about how trauma disrupts our belief systems, and that's an indicator that we need to do some work when that happens. We've provided an overview of what transformational meaning is and its role in our recovery and in post-traumatic growth, in the good things that can come and the resilience we can build out of our exposure to trauma. We've discussed the different components and how we can use those to enhance our own personal experience in this work. So hopefully we've covered those things for you, and we would be really happy to answer any questions any of you have at this point.
Thanks so much, Eric and Jean. That it's so insightful. I always love just the wisdom that you all have to share and the vulnerability. That's it's so important to this work. So at this time, we will take questions. We haven't gotten any in the chat, so I will use the power of pause to give everyone just a moment in case they come in. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat at this moment before we wrap up. All right, we did get a question in. How is it best to approach a trauma victim when it is a current prolonged exposure issue?
That's a really good question and really important. And if it's current, the first thing that you need to do is just acknowledge that they're in a difficult position. And if they're still in it, safety planning is the very best thing you can do, and talk about it as a reality of being in a difficult position, whether that's a child you haven't been able to remove from a home where there's danger, or a current intimate partner violence victim, or someone who's been exposed to violence on the street and they're not ready to leave yet. Any of those things, the first goal is to just acknowledge that they have experienced really hard stuff, that they have managed to come through it, that they're, just really value their asking for help. Thank you for being willing to talk to me. It takes a lot of courage to do this. It takes a lot of courage to come forward. I want to honor that for you. I want to tell you how much I respect that. And then say, and I would like for us to work on some of the things that are dangerous for you right now. Because when somebody's experiencing current trauma, or they just recently have, you don't want to open up asking them to work about the hard stuff until you know they're in a stable, safe environment where they won't be traumatized again. We don't work on trauma when we're right in the middle of trauma. And for our clients, it's really important we don't ask them to open up too much too early, because they need to be in a safe, stable environment to adequately process trauma. That's why today some of the things that Eric and I talked about were making sure that you know who you can talk to, who will support you when this happens. And for people who are in dangerous situations, their defensive posture is protective. Remember that all of our trauma responses were designed to protect us from trauma, and they're useful while we're experiencing trauma. So if someone's still in a traumatic environment, we don't expect them to process it. We expect to help them plan for getting into a safer and more stable environment, which is when they can process it. I hope I answered effectively for what you were asking. But that's the first step when somebody's in a really current traumatic situation.
Eric, did you have anything to add to that by chance?
No, that's kind of a clinical thing. I'd leave that to Jean, but thank you.
All right, no
I agree
worries.
with what she says. I'm not an expert, so yeah.
Okay. Do we have any more questions at this time? So we do have
Yes.
someone.
Yeah, and
question.
I'll address that, Gene, real quick if you don't mind. That's one thing that we do. It's a profound statement that, and I like that you use the fact you create walls around your heart and your brain. The problem is that's true. We build walls. You build a wall, and you build this fortress around yourself. But then when you go home at the end of the day, you're standing there with the fortress around you, but the bad guy's gone. So now you're just alone in a prison, and all the people that love you can't get in now. So that's a really good analogy, is to try to break those walls down enough so that you can, when you're not in the work, you can be the beautiful person that your loved ones need and want you to be.
Absolutely. And I saw that we had the first person who asked a question asked also, so stabilization is the key. Stabilization and support. So if someone is, for instance, really stuck in their trauma and they're escalated, but they're not in a safe ways to process it, helping them do some breathing, getting them to move, even if they're walking to get a glass of water with you, can help to process the stress chemicals so they can come out of that immediate trauma reaction is a really powerful tool. And explaining that I want you to be feel okay enough that if we talk about something, you're not going to feel like you're getting hurt again by talking about it. You're not going to be so distressed like you are right now, where you're having rapid breathing, you can't stop crying, you can't stop shaking. I want to help you get to a more stable, safe circumstance. If it's a living situation, it's explaining, I am concerned that you may be unsafe in your living situation, and none of us can do a lot of hard work on dealing with stuff when we're unsafe. The first step is to get safe. So real simple explanations, but real direct ones about why I'm not asking you a whole lot of details of about what kind of trauma you experienced, because that comes once you're safer and once you have the adequate support to deal with it. Yes, breaks would be an excellent an excellent tool. And also letting and giving the survivor some degree of empowerment around that, i.e., setting up that you're going to ask, but that they can say whether they're ready for a break or not. And also sometimes setting up a signal where they feel like they're overwhelmed and they can't go on, so that maybe they have a word that they use, or if it, depending on what kind of litigation, that they can say, I need a break. I don't know if there's an ADA listing of accommodations for that. In some circumstances, there are there are ADA accommodations around trauma in Title IX circumstances. You would need to be working with someone who has a mental health background or an ADA background to determine if that were the case. But it is definitely consistent with trauma-informed practice with trauma survivors. I don't know if it's been translated into a specific ADA accommodation.
Thank
But
you all
great
so much for your
questions.
questions so far. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you for the great questions. It tells me you're thinking about doing things outside of the box to protect survivors in difficult circumstances, and I really appreciate that. It's powerful work.
Right. So if there are no more questions, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for your participation and joining us today. Just a few things for closing. If you need to get in touch with OJJDP Zentak, again, that is myself, my colleague Eileen Lafergie, and Megan Nieto. You can reach us by email at ojjdptta@usdoj.gov. You can also find us on OJJDP's website. We do have a few upcoming events, a number of upcoming events, I should say. If you want to keep up with those, you can go to OJJDP's events page. You can also subscribe to their Juve Just announcement. That is a listserv in which you'll get notifications for all our upcoming webinars, just like today. Again, you can also go to OJJDP's website for a variety of additional information. If you need training and technical assistance, you can go to TTA 360. This is OJJDP's online portal in which we can connect you with a variety, it's about 60 plus TA providers, just like the Innocent Justice Foundation, where you can get your TA needs met. We'll pair you again with one of those 60 plus, sometimes even two. So if you need any TA, go to TTA 360 for additional support. Again, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on OJJDP's multimedia and YouTube pages. A transcript will be available as well. You can reach out to us again at our email. If you want to stay connected with OJJDP, we are on a variety of social media platforms, including X, Facebook, YouTube, JuveJust, and their website. So again, thank you so much for your participation. Thank you, Michelle, Jean, Eric. It has been so enlightening and such a pleasure to work with you all and hear from you today. Y'all take care.
Thanks, Trevor, and thanks everyone who attended.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your attendance.
Thanks, Trevor.